We can see it. All right, you're good to go.
Okay, I thought I'd start out with just a little overview on what I'm going to try to cover this morning. A little bit about the history of saline wetland protection and restoration. Then I thought I'd talk a little bit about some what's going on currently with a grant we got to take a comprehensive look at the Little Salt Creek watershed. And then I was going to focus on the restoration that was completed out at Marsh Wren here just north of Lincoln. One of the things about restoration, I guess a point that I wanted to make was these tend to be can be fairly expensive projects. So one of the things that the partnership and others have worked on is, site protection. And, usually that's done, the most effective, obviously, is the ownership of the land. There's been work done, conservation easements or long-term agreements, either with different entities. One of the earliest restoration or protection efforts really has to was a lot of work done by the Game and Parks Commission up in the Rock Creek watershed. And I was involved early on with that Weir project. And there was a series of a very large weir kind of down in this area to protect against future head cutting. And then there's some smaller weirs that were done up at Rock Creek. And then also part of that project or a follow-up project was some work to do some water impoundment and water control structures. One thing I want to stress as far as restoration goes, the partnership and their partners have essentially learned something different from all of the restorations that we've done, and we've kind of built on those as we've gone along. So most of the land that the restoration have taken place up at Rock Creek has been the ownership of the Jackson Wildlife Management Area, and then recently Pheasants Forever has gotten involved with some acquisition on the west side of Jackson, west of 77. And people can see my cursor, right, Sean?
Yes, we can.
One of the district's early efforts in protection of saline wetlands was the acquisition of some conservation easements. The first one just north of Jackson on Ray and Giano's property, and then two subsequent ones from neighbors of there. And one of those properties was ended up being purchased by Game and Parks and added to the Jackson area. So since then they've done a lot of work with water control structures. And a point that I wanted to make about learning early on, some of the thought was, maybe we need to concentrate on impounding surface water because these are so important for migratory waterfowl and some other things. But as we've gone along, we've found that that impoundment can actually have some detriment. And so we've gone back and, changed some of our thinking about that, and water, being able to control the hydrology and have some options to vary those water levels is very important. So this slide is just showing the Rock Creek saline wetlands. This is the Little Salt Creek portion of it that I'll kind of focus on. And then also this is the area that is around what formerly used to be Capitol Beach. We haven't really done much down in the southern portions of Lancaster County that Ted had referred to, and there's a new opportunity that I think we're going to be able to do some things in association with Pioneers Park that the board just approved a partnership with last night. But this is just some information that Ted's already kind of gone over. the current effort that the partnership is working on is the NRD, on behalf of the Saline Wetland Conservation Partnership, was awarded a PL 566 watershed grant to plan and implement work in the watershed, addressing stream issues, sedimentation issues, infrastructure protection, and then also saline wetland restoration. That effort is going to include combining, or actually 3 components. One of those components is taking what's already been done, which is called the Upper Little Salt Saline Wetlands Plan, which this is 14th Street north of Lincoln. This is the Salt Creek watershed, and they've identified and have planned restoration activities on all the saline wetlands from 14th Street upstream to essentially Branch Stroke Road. And another part of that is the Little Salt Creek Capital Improvement Project, or this Little Salt Creek Master Plan, which was done several years ago with a partnership between the NRD and the city of Lincoln to look at capital improvement projects in the entire watershed. And those sorts of things are looking at hard points to help set grade stabilization. That was alluded to before about how that affects head cutting and stuff. And it also is addressing sediment basins and some other things to not only help with those kinds of inputs, but those hard points or those grade stabilization fixtures also are important to road infrastructure and bridge pilings and abutments and some of those things. So the grant that we've got is going to take this plan and combine it with the Upper Little Salt Creek Saline Wetlands Plan, and add to that Upper Little Salt Creek plan the saline wetland restoration opportunities and ideas down from North 14th Street down to the mouth. So this first stage in this PL 566 grant is to come up with a work plan that addresses the entire watershed. So we were pretty happy about that, and we're currently in the process of selecting a consultant to do this first step. There's the way that the NRCS USDA has explained it to us, that there's 3 steps in this grant. The first one is this environmental assessment work plan for the entire watershed. The next step would be actually to put final plans and specifications put together if and when funding comes available at the federal level. And then the third step would be actually the funding to implement what was identified in the plan. And one thing I want to stress here, we have a lot of ownership by the various partners of saline sites, but it's not only exclusive to those. We are also going to address what sites are still on in private ownership and make efforts to work out some sort of agreement with those landowners if they're willing to do that sort of work on their property to protect and restore their saline wetland. Let's see. In the Little Salt Creek watershed, some of the early projects, I talked a little bit about Rock Creek, but some of the early projects kind of revolved around Arbor Lake was one of the very early ones, which the partnership came back and revisited some of that stuff and made changes as far as how the on-site hydrology worked. That's been pretty successful. The Nature Conservancy, when they got involved with the mitigation site for Burlington Yards, they put together the Little Salt Fork Marsh Preserve, and that's been around quite a while. And then one of the NRD's earlier restoration efforts was associated with that Whitehead saline well in there east of Cracker Barrel. And we've kind of tweaked that multiple times to try to have a better way of managing the hydrology out there. And you know, these things are all still kind of in the works as far as how we manage and approach these restorations. So like I said, I was going to focus today on the Marsh Wren Community Wetland Management Area, which is shown here. This is Salt Creek as it comes north of Lincoln past the flood control system. North 27th Street, Interstate 80, Little Salt comes in here, and you can see, as was discussed before, some of those old oxbows and meanders that were cut off to get the water to move to Ashland as fast as possible. So there's quite a few properties that are publicly owned or under conservation easement. There's the Schleich wetlands that was donated to the district. Whitehead was donated as part of their development along North 27th Street. And you can talk to Ted about, you know, some of those things later. That was kind of one of those deals where you gave up something, some compromise, and they got in return for some of the development. One thing they did do too is this was the original track that was put together, but then they worked with this developer here of these houses and added this piece that kind of really essentially completed that, what was remaining of that basin. And then there's a couple of conservation easements the NRD holds, and Ted was involved with some of that stuff with that development, with those hotels and some of those other things. So it's very challenging in an expanding urban landscape, and we're kind of got some lines in the sand more or less drawn. Another one that came up that the NRD manages for the city of Lincoln is Dakota Springs. So that kind of gives you an idea where I'm going to be focusing on, and that would be Marsh Wren. The Flatwater Group put together the conceptual plans for Marsh Wren. There was a lot of study that went into this, and if you were involved in this Legacy Conference in 2017, you'll recognize some of these slides that I'm using. But these yellow dots that I'm looking at, those were wells that were put in to get an idea of the some of the groundwater, the near surface groundwater hydrology. There was also some some resistivity mapping that looked at where some of the saline soils are still prominent. Along with that, there was a lot of soil sampling to get an idea on how much sediment had accumulated over the years. This drainage here is off of cropland, and this is all cropland. So we got information on that. There was also a pretty comprehensive look at the existing vegetation to kind of give us an idea of where we're starting from. Another big component of that, this 80 was formerly school lands that there was a hunting, this hunting club had the lease on it for years, and they cobbled together a dam here, which was one of those big head cuts, impounded this water, and then they were using it for dog training. So one of the things that the plan looked at, and what we did was we re-armored this structure and fortified it, put in a water control structure, and then we also have some capabilities of utilizing a water right that came with this property out of Salt Creek. Some of the other features that were looked at, we looked at the mouth of Little Salt Creek here. You can see one of the old oxbows. This was an area that was identified where we pulled back the bank of the slope several feet to try to get an area big enough that would maybe mimic what we think historically happened with maybe 1 to 10 year flow events where it would overtop and get out into this area here. One of the biggest components of this, when we put this together, is we realized that when this land here was offered to us, it was up to the existing fence line. We recognized that we needed to get property outside the floodplain to be able to build some buffer and berm and from this crop ground, which we are pretty sure will eventually be developed into houses or something. And so this land here was really very expensive, and we put it together with this, and the total land bill or land cost for this whole area was about $590,000. One of the biggest components of this is what we wanted to try was to actually drill some saltwater wells. And Ted talked a little bit about that, but I wanted to point out here, this is the location of one of those wells, and here's another one, and I'll kind of focus on that some more.
3 minutes here, Dan.
3 minutes? Wow, that went fast. Okay, this is a saltwater irrigation system, taking out the sediment on the east side, and also on the west side. You can see where that was removed. The saltwater distribution system is nothing more than irrigation pipe. This is some geology about the well depths, about 216 on one, 155 on another. They're designed to pump 250 gallons a minute. How salty is this stuff? It's essentially 2/3 of the way to seawater. This is what seawater is. Our analysis compares with that, and so the bottom line is it's very salty. Here's another shot of the distribution system. As far as results, each of those systems is 3 sections, 300 feet long. We can control water at every gate and every section with valves and everything. So after a couple of years, you can see where the extent of the saltwater went to, as far as affecting the vegetation that came in. You'll notice in the next slide some of the woody vegetation that is killed. This was taken by a drone footage from just this year. This is one of the well installations, and you can see how that area has expanded, and we're starting to see some formation of some of the salt flats. This is looking to the northeast. Water control structure, we can manage what we wanted to have for water levels here. And then again, we've got our encroaching development that we're having to deal with. And this is just another shot of that. The west side, this is an early one after we pumped for a year or so. You'll see that the trees have died. I want to point out that this is the old fence line for this used to be crop ground. And here's another shot of it. About a year ago, I was out there kicking around and saw some saltwort that was coming in. And remember this tree right here, but this is the saltwort community that is out there now, and it's continuing to expand. But what I thought was interesting was this honey locust tree that was killed out now has saltwort and spear scale atriplex growing at its base. So we're definitely making some progress. This is a photo by Ethan Fries of the same area. I believe it was this year. What's interesting is below these distribution lines, once you get to the fence line, they develop preferential flow paths down into what we call the Hemi Marsh. And so what's fun is you can see where that water flows, and you can see where the salinity is higher, and you'll actually see saltwort coming in along the banks of these preferential flow paths. This is the east end of that west distribution system, and one of those early Frank Shoemaker Marsh photos, you'll see some of these preferential flow paths in those. I don't know if those were constructed or naturally occurring, but you can see how the distribution terrace has built up the salt, changed the vegetation. We're going to try to do some more work here to move that saline water into this area to try to expand that salt flat. But what's also interesting is look at how it's affecting up gradient of the distribution system. So we're really encouraged by what's going on. And I guess what I wanted to mention was that there were beetle larvae released in this area, and actually some adults did emerge, and then there's some other adults released later, which is kind of fun since that was crop ground not that many years ago. So sorry if I went over, Sean, I got a little hung up on that first stuff. So
Totally fine, Dan.